Welcome everyone to the new episode, which is episode 4. And today we have two special guests, which are Mrs. Grace from Gracious Spaces, interior designer from North London and all surrounding area. She's very best on her field, and we'll find out from her today what's determined her to choose this field. And then we have Mr. Paul from Polygon Architects, which is one of the best architects in North London and surrounding. And we'll find out from both of them today what's make them to choose actually to be architect and designer. Welcome today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll start with some questions, if that's all right. And the first question is going to be to actually Mr. Paul. It's what inspired you to start Polygon Architects?
So I was working in a practice for about 10 years, working on kind of larger scale residential, sometimes schools, in North London, and actually going kind of back before that. So that was after I graduated from the Bartlett. I joined that firm. Before that, in Kent, where I grew up, I was lucky enough to join a firm which was kind of about 6 sort of architects, large, quite a nice sized practice, and they focused on residential projects. So there it was working on mostly homes, kind of in and around in Kent, like in Medway and Swale, and they had a really kind of good sort of niche of being, I'd say, kind of the best architecture firm kind of out there. So I got kind of an apprenticeship really of working on residential homes, working alongside some really kind of good architects, where they, took me under their wing. Then I kind of, like I say, worked in the London practice, working on much bigger scale projects, which has its own challenges. But what I guess I found from that was it was quite kind of removed from the actual process of creating buildings and the kind of the nuts and bolts of putting buildings together. And then about 10 years ago, I bought a house with my partner, and we had the opportunity to renovate and extend that house. And I suppose that was the point where I really started to enjoy and get the hunger for working with families again, working on the kind of the smaller scale, and working on a kind of on a project from the beginning right the way through to the end. Working on like larger projects is great, but you're kind of often like a small cog in a project that can take many years. And as an architect, you might get put on a very specific part of the process. I was always on the kind of the early stages, the kind of the concept and the visualization and the design of these projects. But what I really started to realize, I loved the actual sort of building, meeting contractors, site visits. So yeah, it really started from doing my own house, and from doing that, people started asking me, "Oh, could you design an extension?" I was still working for this practice. Those projects sort of came through one by one, and after several years of sort of running sort of 2 jobs, I sort of thought, "Yeah, let's go for it. Let's set it up officially." And yeah, it was like 10 years ago actually. In 2 weeks, 10 years, I set up Polygon Architects, and I've deliberately just kept it, and I think I want to keep it just focused on families.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I get people kind of contact me like, "Oh, I want to turn this house into a block of flats, get an HMO application, or just want to kind of flip it with planning permission," it doesn't really interest me. It's whilst it's hard working with families, as Grace, you are very kind of, that's all you do really, right?
Yeah.
The sort of the focusing in on the people. I think it's the most rewarding.
Yeah.
Satisfaction on the completion of the house, and you can see the clients actually enjoying the family.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that. It's like, having gone through that process myself, I kind of lived what it was like to create a home where you've thought about every last little piece in that house and tailor it to yourself. it's a real luxury to sort of design your own home at quite an early point in your life. And Grace, you did the same, right? It kind of was almost the kickstart of.
Yeah, I'd say it was probably a similar kind of genre into that path, because I worked for many years in publishing. So I worked for a big company called Condé Nast and worked on the kind of commercial side of magazines, so responsible for all the revenue and the sales team. And it was whilst I'd always really loved interior design and had a passion for it, and came from a very kind of creative background. So my parents were in fashion and my mum was very interiors focused. And so we always had that kind of those nice things at home. It was like living in a museum, and there was always World of Interior magazines hanging around. But it was only upon doing the project with an architect at the time, and we worked really well together. And it was kind of the combined forces of obviously what he brought to the table and then what I wanted to introduce from an interiors perspective, that it felt like it was a real thing that I could genuinely move into. Whilst obviously Paul is completely sort of professionally trained, realistically I'm not. So I sort of learned on the job, which has obviously got its pros and its cons.
Yeah, if I may though, it's interesting because architecture is such a big discipline. And whilst, like, for example, what I was doing in the previous practice, working with a large firm, compared to what I do now, obviously it was the same role, you are an architect, but it's a completely different kind of job that you have to do working in a big practice when you're part of a big multidisciplinary team, and you've got, within the office, you've maybe got 6 or 7 people working on that project, and then you've got different consultants, you've got M&E engineers, you've got acousticians, you've got planning consultants. It's a massive team working on a project, and you're just like a small part of it. Like what I have to do now, once you say I'm sort of professionally trained, is I feel like I also learn on the job how to design small scale residential projects just through doing.
Yep.
And by doing your own house, it's the best way, because you can take some risks, and you can see every day what is happening on site. And I was fortunate enough to have that house done with a really good contractor who's really smart, still one of the best contractors, who does all of the work himself. So he was sort of like explaining every step of the way how things are going together. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Yeah. So in a way that's quite nice, because I wasn't just kind of, other than this kind of earlier practice, I wasn't kind of having to just emulate how another practice had sort of set up and how they were running, how they were drawing, how they were like communicating to the builders.
Yep.
All of that, I feel like, has been an evolution, and every project that improves and I sort of tailor it, learning from previous mistakes.
Yes, it's really it's very hard, because people say, oh, sometimes, and sometimes you feel that perhaps it holds you back, maybe that you don't have that qualification. But I guess there could be a young person who hasn't got that lived experience, who may be able to draw and design on paper, but actually that then doesn't translate into the real world. So I guess what I would hope is that I bring in some age and experience, and actually really being able to empathize and sympathize with clients, because I can genuinely say that I live in the sort of house that we are then designing, whether that's a North London terrace, or whether it's, potentially a semi-detached house down in South London. But essentially, if you've got a family, the needs of
You're always talking about scooters and buggies, aren't we?
scooters,
Where's got young kids?
buggies, and
Where's all this
Yeah.
stuff going, right? Where's, like, it's not a question of having a nice open plan like home. It's always the utility rooms that we spend the most time talking about, and the storage.
Yeah.
Because if your home isn't kind of fit for living, and it doesn't solve all of these kind of annoying problems that that are the things that really stress us out. Like I always say, the easiest bit is kind of designing the nice extension. Like the kind of the delightful space is in some ways the easier thing to do.
Yeah.
The harder thing to do is all that backup space, and really understand, like, what's your kind of process of coming into the house, and like what's shoes, buggies, school bags, like where's your mop, hoover, all of these things going. If you don't have a place for those, your house is going to annoy you still.
Yeah.
And And so we spend an awful lot of time designing storage and really kind of drilling into like how the clients live and their brief and what are the things that frustrate them. It's not like, okay, let's all talk about the lovely kitchen. Like that comes, but actually the harder bit is, where does all your crap go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think it's that, in terms of going back to the original question about how did we both get into it,
Yes.
I think for both of us, it was the personal experience. I didn't necessarily choose this career, but at the time of doing our own house, I wanted a career change because of having a family, actually, and feeling like I didn't want to necessarily be in that corporate world, thinking that I might be able to have more of a work-life balance. Not probably the thing that I've achieved, but it's interesting how you can take those things, because obviously there's things on my house that I've learnt from, and then you can obviously take that to the next project and learn and develop. But Paul and I didn't start out necessarily at the same time. So we met each other about 5 years ago, introduced via mutual friends who were then working on a project together.
That's great to hear that. That's great to hear that. You have worked together on several projects. How would you describe your working dynamic?
It's like a married couple.
Yeah, we've been, yes, I guess it is like a married couple. People often think we are married sometimes.
I think first of all, the dynamic really comes from the fact that genuinely we actually get on with people. We get on with each other. Because obviously when you work in an office or you work in a big corporation, you work with lots of people, but you might not necessarily gel with them. You might not really kind of come from the same principles. And I can genuinely say Paul is not only a fantastic work colleague, but he's a very good friend now. And so therefore, when you come from that same sensibility, it helps the working
Yep.
dynamic. So I would say that we take the job very seriously, absolutely, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. We can have a laugh, and we know that actually we need to kind of build each other up sometimes, because we work as sole operators, really.
Yep.
And sometimes that can be quite lonely, and sometimes it can be quite isolating, and you don't have someone to share the highs and the lows with. So I think we've very much enjoyed kind of collaborating, because it does enable you to have that second opinion, that reassurance, someone to check kind of the technical details.
Yeah.
So I suppose from a dynamic point of view, Paul is probably, I would say that kind of more logical, perhaps not at a slower pace, but just more considered. Whereas I perhaps might be slightly sort of more reactionary. So if there's a problem, I might want to resolve it straight away.
No, I'm often telling you it can wait till tomorrow, don't I?
Yeah. But I think it's just a really useful sounding board, and especially from the kind of start of a project.
100%. I think we both found working in isolation has like quite significant challenges, and obviously whilst Grace is an interior designer, the overlap. I mean, we kind of both talk about what is kind of in both of our disciplines, and we are forever kind of wrestling with all of the decisions we're making together. So
Yeah.
it becomes much more like a partnership, even when like I might be kind of talking at the very high level, at the very initial stage of a project, when we're talking about kind of conceptual layouts of a project, and it really is just about kind of a more sort of strategic arrangement of a layout. We always talk about that together, and even though it isn't necessarily kind of about interior design at that stage, Grace's ability to immediately start thinking about kind of how a space works and the flow, and just kind of the way in which the owners will be using that space, it always gets improved. It always gets better by sense checking things together. And that runs all the way through the project, like all the way through all the stages when we're on site. there is very little that kind of, well, that's your department and that's my department. And I think we both also, what we both share is we are always both very much focused on the how things get done.
Yep.
We are never like, oh, it will just get worked out, right? It's never, we always kind of go down a rabbit hole when we start drawing something. It's like, well, how does that tile meet that tile? And I'm sort of working out how I'm going to draw it to communicate it to the guys on site. You're thinking about how exactly is that tile going to be cut and the setting out, where does it
Yep.
start? So we're both rooted in a real practical sensibility, which
hopefully from a contractor point of view makes your life easier, because we don't just, I think a lot of people think that interior design is just about choosing nice fabric and choosing a nice sofa and looking at paint colours. And I would probably say that accounts for maybe 10% of it. And of course, you have to be thinking about that in the background. But likewise, you've got to be thinking about the practical elements and how people can actually use it, and can it actually be built? Because it might be wonderful to come up with a really, creative concept, but if the execution can't happen
Yeah.
seamlessly, then there's no point, kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's why, like, in a way, the job that we're doing is one of the hardest types of project that you can do. We're all working with existing buildings, which are inherently complicated, full of surprises. Nothing is necessarily going to be, well, nothing ever is like straight or plumb or true or any of these things. And the nature of residential, small scale residential, where we're having to see through the kind of the initial concept to finished product. There's no like, we'll get to planning, do the kind of mood boards, get paid and go. We've got to kind of we've got to see through our ideas.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest bit. Lots of architects and designers will do the pretty easy bit, get the visualizations done, get planning approval. Oh, I can't do the tender pack or oversee it, because that's really where all the hard work is. As you know, because
It's the hard work and the satisfaction actually on completion.
yeah,
Because it's easy to do the tender, the tender pack, the drawings, the planning drawings.
it is easy.
But then how to deliver the project and to be involved in the project, that's from my point of view.
It's where the stress is. You love the stress. Rather than say, how do you not look so stressed, Costel? When we're like, sort of panicking about something. But then, what you achieve at the end, that sense of satisfaction, like, is, you make a really special thing. Like, buildings are very difficult things to make.
Oh, yes.
And a very effortless looking building, once it's complete and everything is composed in the right way and everything has been considered, will look very effortless and obvious. But to get to that point is incredibly difficult and requires an awful lot of planning. We're normally so often just focused on all the little challenges along the way, and it's only kind of at the very end, when it's all finished and it's snagged and the client's living in it, and the clients turn around and say, we can't believe we're living in this house, it's amazing.
Yeah, that's that's the great part of it,
That's good.
I think.
No, that's that's what it is. And actually, when you see the clients actually, it's it's a bigger satisfaction when you see the clients actually happy and enjoying the family, actually the spaces. That's what I see all the time, and that's the satisfaction for me all the time, and I'm sure it's for you as well. What I want to ask you now is, what do you think makes a great collaboration between the architect, designer, and the contractor?
Well, I think probably first and foremost is having a client that sees the value in each of those fields. Okay, because a client may have to have an architect on board because they need the planning drawings, they need to submit planning permission, etc., etc. And they obviously need a contractor. And I guess from an interior design perspective, I'm potentially what people think as being the spare wheel, because a lot of people can feel that they can do it themselves, etc., etc. But I don't think it's until those people get onto site and really understand the amount of decisions and choices and the speed in which those choices need to be made. So I guess bringing it back to the question is, the client needs to see the value in that collaboration, which then enables all three fields to work together.
Yep.
And I think it's about getting those three fields together as soon as possible so that we can start talking about the concept, the scheme, and how that's implemented right from the start. Because the more time we spend in that planning phase and the questioning and finding out whether it's possible, then the easier it is for everybody on site. It also means that that planning means that we can have a much clearer steer on budget. So if we're slightly over on the contractor cost, how can we rein it in on what we call the client supply items, which are all the things that the clients need to buy to make the house look a home. And so I think, and that is all facilitated by good communication and by lack of ego. So there's not one person in that group that is better than the other. And it's about pulling together as a team.
Yeah.
And of course, there'll be disputes and there'll be discussion points and there'll be questions and challenges, because that's how we get the best result.
Yeah.
But it's about saying, I respect that decision. That's a really good point. Shall we adapt that?
And I think, if I can add, like, also for everybody to be wanting to create the best end product. It's like nobody is doing this job for like an easy ride or an easy paycheck. It's like the way you at Costel, you really care about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Oh, yes.
and doing something really well really matters to you. And that's the same as how we work. We're all like, my motivation is to make very lovely things, that thing being a home and a piece of architecture and a space for people to live in. That's why, like I say, like, I'm not interested in sort of working with developers or anything like that, because that is much more special to me. And I suppose if everybody's pulling in that same direction,
Yeah.
then everyone's prepared to put in that little bit of extra, that, whatever effort is required to get to that point. And I think the clients, like you say, the clients also, if they want something special, they need to, like, because some people, along the way, are kind of are happy with something that's without, something a bit more ordinary, and that is fine. And I think what we're always sort of striving towards is trying to make something extraordinary,
Yeah.
something very special. And it takes everybody around the sort of the table to want that: the clients, the contractors, the team.
And I think that's as well, you need to be working with a contractor who understands that the constant questions or seeming nags maybe, or the demands or the requests are not because you're being awkward. It's just because you know how you want that finish to be. But that also comes from experience, because when you work with a contractor that you know and that you've got experience and history with, you automatically know that that finish will be achieved. So therefore you can push in slightly other ways, and you don't need to feel self-conscious or nervous about asking for those details. And I think that that is the difference of what potentially an architect and a designer bring, because I think that sometimes the clients don't want to seemingly upset the contractor or look like they're being too needy, or and so I think that the interior designer can kind of push that level of finish without sounding too demanding.
I understand that.
You say?
For me, it's actually the communication is the key, actually, in between all the contractor, designer, and architect. And yes, just to communicate all the time, everything. Which I see it actually to be one of the key onto it. Yeah. And yeah, that's very important, actually.
And so how does having a consistent team kind of bring the best out for you, or bring the best outcome?
The best outcome is just because, a project when it's starting, actually, is the client starting with the architect. That's when you start first, actually, because the architect is actually starting to discuss first thing. Then yes, is the interior designer, and then it's a contractor. And the best team actually is created by the contractor, by the architect, the designer, and the contractor. And they will have to communicate everything and discuss all the details and everything to deliver to the client, to take the stress away from the client. Which I think all of us want to do that every day. And I know it is not easy because, as an architect, from my point of view, you just need to think about all the details in the beginning, so, dimension of the rooms and everything, and then to coordinate with you as interior designer and to make sure everything is fitting on the room, how you want it. And then we have to deliver as a contract, we have to deliver it. And it is just the communication between all of us, which we are a team actually to deliver for the clients. So for me, I see actually the architect, designer, and the contractor, it's a team.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which is delivering for the clients to their expectation and everything, in there. Because, without an architect, you can't deliver the project. Without a designer, in my opinion, even the client say, oh, I'm going to choose that. But the architect is the architect, doesn't have maybe, the knowledge which a designer have it about designing things.
Well, yes, I think the architects sometimes are not necessarily in our situation, but an architect can sometimes maybe get distracted or caught up in kind of the building and the structure.
Yep.
And it's obviously the interior designer who's then thinking about how many welly boots we've got to store and where are the coats going to live and all of those things that actually make, a house a home. I've seen so many we've seen, not been involved in, but we've seen so many houses be converted and a family home, and you walk in and there's no storage. And it's kind of like a no-brainer, or no sink in a utility room. And it's like, and that's like,
Yeah.
it's not the shell of the building and everything looks beautiful, but making it into a livable home
Yeah.
is not always.
There's too much oversight often with the interior aspect of a project. I think obviously it's what you see of any space is obviously the paint on the walls, the soft furnishings, the floor, the design of the kitchen, the little details, if there's any beading, trims, any of these things, like the skin that you're seeing is all interior design. It is in some ways like the most important bit of it. It's everything you're going to touch. It's everything that
You see after
everything
the
you're
project
seeing.
is finished.
The kind of the high level sort of like the high level strategy and layout and making sure everything kind of works and how it's all built is of course forming the architecture area, but it's kind of, I think it's kind of counterintuitive sometimes to sort of overlook the interior stream of kind of expertise, because that is what a client is going to see and experience every day. And a project is going to cost the build cost of a project is by far the most significant cost that a client is going to be spending. They're going to be spending the same amount on all the interior aspects, that the appliances, the kitchen, regardless. You still need lights, you still need light fittings, you still need paint, you still need carpet, flooring, whatever. I think for those elements then to not be chosen and have the same amount of thought that's gone into the actual design of the building. Like when we work on a project, we spend an incredible amount of time talking and deliberating all of these interior aspects and make sure that they sit within the kind of philosophy of the building as a whole. And it evolves just like the building design does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It kind of happens. We have a kind of concept from the very beginning of a project, and then that philosophy gets realized in all the decisions and all of the material choices throughout the project. And then if there's a piece of joinery is a classic example of where joinery is such a kind of overlap of architecture and interior design, because it has such specific functions which are so dependent on the family's need that only like Grace could kind of have this many conversations about laundry. Right. And like, how does somebody want to do their laundry, and what is the kind of the process of that? And let's design a space so that laundry cycle, that experience of that person doing their laundry is streamlined to suit that family and exactly how they want to do their laundry. And then that gets designed into that laundry cupboard. And it is very much then a kind of, we will always sit down together and work through every joinery item collaboratively.
Yeah.
And I'll be modeling it, drawing it. We'll be kind of talking about, well, how does that meet that? And how is that going to get built? And then how do we communicate this to the joiner? Like, what is our kind of key dimensions that we put on the drawing so that they know kind of how to build it?
Yep.
Like this, there's so many, how does it fit? Like, like we've got this size washing machine, these size laundry baskets. I mean, it's a huge amount of detail goes into pieces of joinery.
But we need to have worked through all of that in order to be able to tell the contractor how, and so I suppose all of those decisions are made earlier in the process, means that we can draw them, we can show them, we can model them, which means that then what you then get to build, you've got very clear instructions on.
Yes.
Because the frustration is that when you've done some work and you have to undo it, or it's not to the right specifications, everyone's said, oh yeah, I'm going to have shelves over there. And then they go and put their books on it. Oh, and the books don't fit. And then that's a disappointment, and it shouldn't be a disappointment. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but we minimize those moments of disappointment.
I often think and say it's so much easier to kind of make mistakes on paper whilst you're doing these. Like, this is why you want to try and work everything out before you start on site. Like, we always try and have, it's not always possible. There might still be a few details and clients might change their mind a little bit during the process, but try and start a project with everything worked out, specified and drawn. And if there needs to be kind of revisions, do that whilst everyone is quite relaxed. As soon as building projects start, everyone gets a little bit more stressed. There's things to have to deal with. Like, you don't want to be still sort of like designing kind of storage at that point, really. You want to be making final tweaks just before it starts. So yeah, make all the decisions on paper beforehand whilst everyone has...
What so many people don't say, it's how much hard work you're putting actually before the project is going live. Behind the scenes,
Absolutely.
everything about think all the details and everything.
Yeah.
To make sure everything is gonna align, to make sure everything is gonna be, delivery on time, or what's the lead time of everything. And it's a lot of hard work actually, like you do on the drawings, which you're doing very details actually, and to the 3D, which you can see exactly how it's gonna look the space, and which is taking time. But sometimes people don't appreciate actually how much time is taking before everything is going live. And the same with architecture, just thinking about everything along the way and think what's going to be when you're starting, what is the information you need to give. Yes, there's going to be some changes along the way, but it's just a lot of hard work before the job is going live, which not many people appreciate.
And I think that's the biggest thing, and we'll probably talk about it later on, is plan, prepare. And I would say that, on an average 18-month project, at least 9 or 10 months of that is planning, drawing, etc. And I think that you'll be able to say from a contractor, if you know that you're working with an architect and interior designer, I think you probably know a little bit more about how things will go on site.
Yep.
If you're not, how does that work out for you, I suppose?
That's, if you work an architect and designer, it's easier for us because you have all the information, everything, and everything is being run, by the designer, by the architect. But if we don't have that, which some clients don't decide to go with an architect and designer, it's making the life a bit harder for us. But we, as you know, we're doing some direct the clients quite a lot actually. I'm just making a plan with the clients from the beginning and saying to them, this is what you're going to get, and just make like a booklet, present it to them, and this is everything. So we know from the beginning, because we don't want to start a project just with the planning drawings, and we're going to start on site. And when we start on site, they didn't make any decision what tiles, what kitchen, everything. And then we have to stop where it's going to delay everything. That's why, so,
It's your nightmare, isn't it?
we presenting everything to the client from the beginning and make a list like you do actually. So we're doing quite a bit of the work you're doing and the work you're doing before we're starting. But if a client is going to keep the architect on board, then work with the interior designer, it's making the life easier for everyone, including for contractor and for them. Because if they were going to work directly with us, we're still going to have to ask a lot of questions and everything. And then if they're working with a designer, the designer will come with a lot of ideas, and it's going to actually make them to feel more relaxed in a way. Yes, we do that. We make them to feel more relaxed, but it's just taking more time in a way, because they come with the planning drawing and say, yeah, I want to start. And if a contractor doesn't know how to handle that, he will start the project and then he will, have to stop because no one knows, which direction to go.
Exactly.
But we have the experience, we know where to go, and I have enough experience now with the clients. But if it's a client which doesn't know what they want in a way, and they want to hire a contractor which doesn't know exactly what the client expectation is, better the client to keep an architect and designer on board, because they will be delivering the project in a way. You can have the best contractor to say, yes, you can deliver it, but they know what they're doing. But if not, get an interior designer and architect in, because that's. And one more thing, which I did say it before, it's actually the architect is the first person discussing the client, discussing their vision, how everything is going to be. If you don't keep the architect on board, that vision is going to stay there just on planning drawings. Because for me to I can take the planning drawings, I can try to visualize everything. But if I don't have the architect on board, then I'm going to discuss with him, get all the tender drawings and everything. I can visualize, because for me, when I get the tender, first I want to visualize how the project is going to look, how the end product is going to look. The same thing with the interior design. If I have all the drawings and everything from you, then I can visualize everything. I know what you want, and I know what the client's going to expect. But if you have just planning drawings given to a contractor, if they don't have the vision, then everything is just gonna fall in a way. It's nothing going to be delivered to the standard, to the expectation. And my opinion is very important to keep the architect and interior designer on the project, and then the contractor, and that's creating the best team to deliver what the clients want.
I think also, like, talking about vision, I think like a lot of clients, or some clients, kind of do know what they want and what they like. I think it's also our job to push that and show them what is possible. And what we are often doing is, I think, exceeding their expectation of the vision of their house. They can believe they now live in these spaces. And I think that's obviously very important, like, to bring something extra. Yeah, and kind of going back a little bit to kind of what you were talking about the kind of tendering process. I think what you were saying about, like, the kind of the package and the drawings. We, or at least I try to, and by the time we get to the starting point of a project, it feels like between us we have kind of built the project on paper.
Yes.
Like, which often I have modeled the entire project, and then collaboratively we have then like populated that 3D space with all of the kind of floor finishes, the lights that we're going to use. I'm often modeling specific tables that Grace has specified and light fittings. So that space is then a really kind of, that model is a very useful tool for the clients to help make decisions. And
especially if they have trouble visualizing. So a lot of clients, look at a sample board or look at 2D plans and struggle. And so the way we work, not all people do that, but
when we're working together, we will. I mean, at the most recent project, like, each of the key spaces, all of the bathrooms, the main kind of extension space, was all modeled to the level of detail that it was kind of exactly as per what was then built. And we were looking just the other day of the rear view of Lancaster Road, and the SketchUp model, and then the photo which I've just taken, because the actual kitchen in that space was also all modeled exactly as was to be built, including all the drawers, everything that was, because it was a bespoke kitchen. So we modeled that kitchen and reviewed it with the clients. We were talking about, where's their food processor going? That drawer is a veg drawer with sort of slats for ventilation. Like, the coffee cups are going here. Like, that kitchen alone, we spent God knows how many hours
thinking about all the details.
Every last detail. We knew where everything was going in that kitchen. And then the 3D model is really useful in that sense, because whilst it's not used to sort of for setting out purposes and taking dimensions off of, in terms of the clients and yourselves and everybody, even for ourselves,
Yeah.
we need to see that space. We to help know like where something might go, or what is the right kind of colors, or what are the right light fittings. I think until you sort of do see it in 3D, it's hard to also have complete certainty that you're making the right decision. So it's a tool that helps everybody, I think.
And that I think it really does help the contractor as well, because I will sometimes even show the mood board of kind of like the furnishings and everything, because you can then at least, or the guys on site can at least see what we're aiming for, because
Yep.
obviously if you're a client or you've been designing that house, it's in your mind, every detail's in your mind for 9 months. But the guys on site don't know that, do they? They don't know the look and the feel that you're trying to create. And so I think the more information that you can give them, the easier it is for them to visualize and the less mistakes are made, really.
I actually think like in future projects, it'd be quite good to do a little presentation to the team. Like
Yep.
for us, and
Yeah.
not necessarily need to be the clients, because the client's already fully on board with what the scheme is trying to be. But I think it just might help just for them to sort of know what they're like now part of what has already been happening for like a long period of time, and this is the beginning of like a very significant stage of the journey of that vision.
Yep.
And just be like, look, this is where we're kind of trying to get to. And it's not to say they would do anything different, but I just think it might prevent them from just sort of being in isolation of just their like current stage, because a building site for most of it looks like, obviously like a building site, it looked like a mess, right? I mean, buildings are really just a mess until you get to that very last stage. Once you got the plaster and you start painting, like behind the scenes, it's wires and stud work, and it's quite a rough thing. And yeah, I don't know if it kind of would help the guys just to like, we could do a little presentation. This is what we're trying to do.
You're
Like,
doing great anyway, because you're doing a lot of 3D, which you can visualize how everything is going to look, and you do the same thing. So actually, when you're giving the plans to us, we can visualize actually how you're doing it,
Yeah.
actually, because both of you doing quite a lot actually in details, and it's actually the 3D plans is help a lot, because you can see how the finished product is going to look.
Yeah.
We should up tech. Because obviously those models
Yeah,
are live. We should like get some VR headsets on the site.
Hey there.
We can like move around. If someone is like not quite sure how this works.
I know, well, now with AI, maybe, yeah, that's all how it will be.
When you start a project, what's the steps actually starting when you're starting to
I mean, obviously, normally kind of an inquiry will come through. Somebody, either through recommendation, or having found like my work on social media, or having found the website, or maybe if someone's found a site board. n- Always just starts with an inquiry. They're looking to do some work. I normally speak to them, reply, to get a kind of a feel for what their brief is. And just have kind of a quick chat. I think
Yep.
it's always good to kind of start to get a kind of a feel for, I guess, like I said before, like the person. If a project becomes a project, by the end of that, you've become very kind of close with the clients. They become friends really for life, and you've gone through quite a lot. It's quite a journey, right? And you make that journey as nice as possible, and that's what we were saying, kind of about like kind of make all the decisions beforehand. Like our job is really to make the process as stress-free for the clients, help them make their decisions.
Yeah.
So I'm always aware of it needing to be kind of the right fit for everybody. But obviously we'll meet the client, discuss the brief. The brief sometimes changes, but initially, you're just trying to get a sense of the scope of what they're trying to do, understand their situation. Like, have they got young kids? Are they looking to have more kids? And quite early on, before any design work happens, normally whilst we're waiting for the existing drawings to be produced from a measured survey, I would send us a survey, a questionnaire, which has sort of more detailed questions about the scope, but also how they live. Like, do they have any particular styles that they like? It's quite revealing sometimes, because I often ask these questionnaires to be written by like both partners, the husband and wife, whatever. And often they'll say, well, I love color, but my husband hates color. And it's like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. There's going to be, there's going to be interesting conflict points, but that's, what do you love? What do you hate about your house? If you had all the money in the world, what would you want? Like, start getting people thinking quite kind of
Yeah.
creatively and if you don't know, if you don't care, we might ask, like, do you particularly want a kitchen island? Some people would immediately say, oh my God, I've got to have a kitchen island. It's quite important to some people. Some people are like, do you know what? Doesn't really matter. Like, brilliant. Okay, cool. We know we can,
Yeah.
Some people really want a range. If we've got specific questions about a kitchen, knowing that they definitely want a range oven starts to,
Or an American fridge
or
freezer.
American fridge freezer, starts sending you in certain directions immediately of what that kitchen's probably going to look like. And it's just good to get people from the very beginning to start thinking about the brief and what is possible, because no two projects that we do are sort of just the copy of the last one.
No.
Everyone is a reflection of the client. And so, to begin with, really just start to understand the people, the family, and the brief.
Yeah.
And then obviously the design process starts, which is all kind of coming out of that initial briefing. And some of that is like much more than problem solving based. Obviously, then you're like in a kind of the reality of what the existing building can do or can't do. But it's yes, and then there's always options, and it's an evolution in the early stages, really.
Now, Mrs. Grace,
Yeah.
about the spaces.
Yeah.
How do you tailor a space not to just look beautiful, but to be functional for a busy family?
Well, it's hugely important, and I would say that that's probably the key thing that really drives me, because you can have something that looks beautiful, but if it doesn't work and it doesn't function and it doesn't flow, then what's the point? So I guess following on from what Paul was saying, it's all really about how well you take the brief and how well you understand the clients. And you really do need to ask, like, a lot of personal questions. It's a bit like the Spanish Inquisition, because you really do need to know, are they the sort of people that wash up and leave stuff out? What sort of cook are they? Do they like things to be on display? Are they neat and tidy? Do you have a husband who snores and needs to sleep in the spare room? Like, you really do need to spend a lot of time understanding those clients and understanding what they do not like about their current home, what is lacking, what they do want to achieve. But really, I would say that form and function have to be the base foundation, which you can then layer on the kind of character and in the interior design. Now, that doesn't have to cost a huge amount of money. I often work with kitchens that are off the shelf. They don't have to need to be a bespoke kitchen, but that kitchen needs to have that perfect kind of sink, bin, dishwasher location, because already I'm thinking about walking from the dining table and then are you scraping your plates? Do you rinse your plates before you put them in the dishwasher, or don't you? And it's all those kind of like minute details. And I guess then that if I know that maybe they're not the tidiest of families, or they don't like to live in a certain way, then I'll kind of tailor the aesthetic to help them achieve a kind of, I suppose, tidier lifestyle. But ultimately, the design has to make their everyday life easier. Okay, that is like, I would say that is the key element. Then I would like you to be able to walk into that space and for it to bring you joy and for that space to sing. And it might just be one little moment that really kind of does that. But I think that that's the sort of thing that I think about the most. So we've talked about it so many times, but the hardest working spaces, such as the utility room, the cloakroom, the downstairs toilet, are the things that we agonize over the most, because that then enables you to have, the kind of to live in the more beautiful spaces. We live in, not necessarily the biggest footprint of houses, so every space works. But if you were to say live in a large country house, you'd probably have a second kitchen or a prep kitchen or a boot room and things, which means that you can hide all that away, so then you can really enhance that. But why shouldn't we be able to kind of recreate that practicality in a smaller space? So that's kind of,
That's good.
and I think that where we've both started from in terms of being that person, I have 2 children. I know what it's like. I know about the footballs and the sports bags and the, et cetera, and so I can feel it. I can live it for them.
And you and I are similar though. We like to know where things are in our home.
Okay.
It's like everything needs to sort of like have a place,
Everything has to have a place.
because you don't want to. I think your life just becomes an easier life when you know where things are. You're not spending all your time scrambling around for things. Putting things away becomes a really easy process. Tidying up becomes easy when everything has got a place to go back to.
Yeah.
And once you kind of just establish those things, it's not that hard to kind of maintain them, right? But this is what you actually have to say. For some people, it actually is. Sometimes you have to just accept, actually, they're not going to live like that. We can't change people's personalities. Some people want to live more like that, and once we enable them to have those spaces, then
Then they will change there.
then it's
Sometimes
Yeah.
we have to. It's interesting because as a designer or an architect, you do fulfill many roles, from couples therapy to marriage counselor to mediator, etc., because there's sometimes quite harsh, not harsh questions, but you have to be quite straight talking to begin with. And when you're saying you are spending a significant amount of money here, you want to change, etc., but also that means potentially adapting the way you live and thinking about, actually, could you live in this way in order to make this house feel better? And
It's definitely true. Some people are maybe living in a messier way of life because the house just has never really been fit for purpose with the number of people that are living there. And most houses don't have any storage. I mean, it's
that typical thing when you walk into particularly North London terrace, and you've got that hallway, and there's just oodles of coats on the wall and shoes, and instantly it's definitely not good for my nervous system. But it's not the kind of, you don't, when you've had a busy day at work or the kids have been screaming at you, it's not the sort of environment that you want to walk into. And I know it sounds silly, but it can be transformational, that if you change that, actually it changes the space. That hallway for me is the moment. This is, you walk into the house. This is the opening page to a book. And so I think a lot about hallways and utility rooms.
yeah.
And I don't think the clients don't sometimes realize that they're thinking about their big open plan kitchen and their glazing and their connection with the outside, but we have to pull that back, because, no offense, you can have a beautiful kitchen extension, but if you've got a laundry maiden stood at the end because you've got nowhere else to dry the clothes, what's the point?
Yeah.
So you'll laugh at me, because in every single project we've worked on,
Pulley
made, which is the hanging clothes area, features for that reason.
I mean, similarly, like quite a few of the projects I've worked on, we've used the Victorian terrace house setup. And this is what I did in my own house, and then have done subsequently with other projects. Have discussed with the clients the benefit of using the second reception room, because once you've done the side return, that second reception room becomes one of the least used spaces, and it doesn't necessarily work very hard then on the floor plan. And there is definite benefit in using nearly all, or maybe 2/3, and making the front living room slightly bigger, that as the kind of the dedicated engine of the floor plan. So you can kind of get several things in that space. You can get the cloakroom off of the hallway. You can get a utility room, maybe with a shared or separate WC, depending on the size of the footprint. You can also, depending on if you put in the kitchen in the side return, you can then get a pantry coming from that kitchen into that.
Yep.
So that one space, and also because it's normally quite a tall ceiling height, you can also, on 1 or 2 projects, I've had a utility room then with kind of like a loft storage space access from the pantry or from the hallway. So that one space, which can often become a very underutilized second reception room, and it's kind of a corridor.
Yep.
Can do all of these things. And by doing that, it solves your kind of coats and shoes. It allows your kitchen and dining space to, because of the pantry, you don't need high level cupboards. You don't need any food in your kitchen. All of that can go in the pantry. You've dealt with your washing machine, tumble dryers, scooters, kids' bikes, all in that one space. And every other space, because of that space, is much more relaxed and much kind of calmer, and there's less stuff that needs to go in it. And like some people find it difficult to understand, like, well, I'm losing kind of like what is
A room.
like a second reception room. That's kind of quite a nice kind of, we have a couple of chairs and maybe it's a library, or we'll put a piano in it or something. And it's convincing them that actually it's doing a lot, all of these other spaces, and your life is improved by giving that away to what are seemingly quite boring functions.
Yeah.
I feel like we've spoken a lot about pantries and utility rooms so far, but not the nice kitchens.
Yeah, we should do that. Do you find your design evolve once the contractor is involved, once the project is started?
You mean on site?
Yes.
I don't. Well, you can probably answer this as well. I don't think we do have to make that many changes, or I mean, there are obviously tweaks, but in terms of the fundamental design,
Yep.
and we don't want to go over it, but we've kind of given you why, and that's because we spend so much time in the planning. We discuss it with you.
Yes.
You're aware of the vision, and unless kind of the house falls down during the project, which touch wood, it hasn't happened yet. We don't really, and I think that is down to the planning. I don't think it necessarily needs to if you've done the groundwork. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree completely with that.
And I guess that's another reason why having professionals, working together from the start alleviates the stress of that.
In your opinion, what do you think the homeowners need to understand more before the project is starting, or the extension of renovation?
Well, I think like what we've said before, really, like the value of planning and not rushing. Like it's not uncommon that I might get a phone call and it's like, oh, we're really hoping to start kind of on site in 3 months, even 6 months.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to do it properly
Yeah.
and take your time over the decisions, you really want to like a year.
Yeah.
If you're doing a significant renovation and you're working with a team such as us, take your time and go through, get everything worked through before you start.
Ready for construction, just to go through all the details, plan everything in details and everything before you get to the contractor to start actually. To allocate enough time.
For their benefit, really.
Yeah.
Like, really, because clients, once a project starts, if they're either, if they've moved away throughout the build, or if they're living on the site, everyone's lives become more strained. Like everyone is in juggling. It's very stressful, I think, for any homeowner to see their home go through what has to happen before you get to the nice finished product at the end of an extension. It's normally quite disconcerting to see your house flooring ripped up to earth. You've got acro props, you've got walls demolished,
dust everywhere.
It looks like kind of a scene from World War One. Like it's quite disconcerting, and you have to really go through quite a lot before it starts to look nice again. And you don't want to be having to sort of like talk about sort of tile choices and like even bathroom layouts during that period. You want to be keeping these guys kind of like, everything's fine, we've done all the hard work, you guys can relax, go and live in Cornwall for like 6 months, and come back when it's
Yeah.
That's the best situation, really. Like,
I would say absolutely. Like I would hope that people would just understand the amount of time it takes to plan and prepare.
Yeah.
And that then allows for a better outcome ultimately. I often get people will phone me and say, I've got the contractor starting next month. Can you help us design our kitchen? And that's just like alarm bells to me, because that is essentially you or them wanting to just pass all of their stress onto me. And that's not a great way to design. Even as a professional, I don't want to design in that context, because you're essentially then eliminating the choice, because you're saying, okay, well, I can only get a kitchen that's got a lead time of this. I can't get any bespoke products because they won't be on site in time and you're going to cause delays. So you're limiting the possibility because you haven't allowed enough kind of
Yeah.
planning time, which is a real shame. Also, okay, you might only have the budget to do your kitchen renovation, but if you know that you want to change the rest of the house, plan that house as a whole, holistically.
Not just in parts.
Even the garden. A lot of people forget about the garden, but if you're doing a beautiful extension and you're opening up to the outside world, that becomes another room.
Yep.
You are going to have that wonderful view. You need to think about doing the garden, because if you don't have side access, how are you going to get all of that garden waste through your beautifully designed home? So I think, and Costel, you're smiling because this is what always happens, because you're probably halfway through your build and the client's like, oh, actually, can you do the garden? And gardens are not a cheap add-on.
No.
Right? They need to be factored into the budget, or at least that's definitely one of the questions when we're at briefing stages. What are we doing with the garden? What do you want to happen? Because it's not just a couple of £1,000 on plants. It's a significant investment. You're talking of not anything less than, I would say,
One of the biggest,
10 to 15,000.
one of the most transformational bits of a project as well.
Yes.
Like you say, it's your new living room. Like once you've done your lovely extension, that new space is the whole point. Is everyone wants to sort of link that indoor and outdoor space, and rightly so. We want to live more outside, but yeah, it should not be an afterthought, and it should sort of align and be kind of worked through conceptually along with the building work idea.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think, so really, I'd say planning and preparation, allowing yourself the time to make it exactly what you want, to make it the dream house, so that you can make the revisions, you can choose all those key items, but also getting a real understanding of the budget,
Yes.
And there's the contractor cost, so the labor, yourself, but then there's also the client supply schedule, which is the kitchen, the floorings, the lighting. Not just that, though, the hinges for the new door, and the door handles, and the sockets, and the thermostats, and all those things that add up. And, even the delivery on the new flooring, which can potentially be £200 because it's coming on a pallet. And all of those things, even light bulbs, light bulbs can end up costing £500. And if they're not in the budget, the clients then start to panic and the budget then spirals. So it's really about understanding those things and how they combine. And then the fact that you've got to create a holistic space. There's no point in investing so much money in one area, but not thinking about how that works with the rest of the house.
That's why the clients, the homeowners, they need architects and designers, because they think about everything from their experience.
Yeah.
Yes, a homeowner, a client can think about it, but can't think everything like on details, like you said earlier, hinges, handles, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll start the process. Yeah, but they decide about the hinges. Oh, but they need to decide that. But if you have someone on board like you, as an interior designer, then you think about all the details, even on the bathroom, all the tower, hangs, the hooks,
Yeah.
all the toilet paper holders, everything.
Yeah.
Decision overload as well.
Yes,
Like, it's the number of decisions that have to be made in a project, especially with the client supply end, is I don't think people maybe think they've like 20% of what you actually need to decide.
Yep.
Think I've got to decide these
Yeah.
things. There's all this other stuff, and all this other stuff is really boring stuff and hard stuff. Like a lot of it is really technical.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like we are often looking at radiators. We've got to work backwards from what radiators we want that need to be the right size, so that we can then know to give to your plumber the exact position on the wall or on the floor, the exact setting out for where that radiator needs to go. And same with tiles, like to create a really lovely tiled niche in a shower, you've got to know those tiles and work it backwards and be able to produce a set of drawings to give to you guys to make sure that everything is sort of centered and correct by the time it's all finished. And so to decide for a client to say, "Oh, just decide it kind of when we're nearer to needing to do the tiling," you can do that, but it won't look right at the end. And the bathrooms are really, I mean, all of like a project, like I said before, when things are done well, they look effortless.
Yes.
And you don't realize how it has to be kind of foreplanned to get to that effortless place where it's all driven by like a center symmetry and everything is set out and aligned off of quite key centering lines.
Yep.
I think in a bathroom, just for a shower enclosure, there is probably 27 decisions. Whether that's an exposed shower tray or a tileable shower tray. Do you want a fixed shower head? And do you want that coming out of the ceiling or do you want that coming out of the wall? Do you want to have a shower screen? Do you want to have a hinged door? Do you want to have a towel radiator or underfloor heating? Do you want to have a shower niche? Do you want to have brass? Do you want to have chrome? This is not to talk about overwhelming people.
And then once
but
you've decided you want brass, you've then got to find, I mean, I'm so pleased when I work with you because I can see what's involved in getting the taps, the hinges, the window hardware.
Yes.
Obviously all come from like maybe 3 different places, but they all need to look like they belong to each other.
Yeah.
And the amount of time that is spent to get the same kind of quality of brass finish across, from the radiator valves and the radiator itself to the taps to the little finger pulls of that recessed mirror, all to kind of look like they belong. And once they do, no one gives it a second thought when you walk into that bathroom because it all works. But to get it to all work,
But it's been the hard work before.
It's the
thinking
hard work,
about all
right?
the details and everything before.
And that's I suppose the thing as well. There is so much choice now. So Pinterest and Instagram are absolutely fantastic, but clients spend a lot of time just going, "Oh yes, I'd like that, I'd like that, I'd like that," and so they come with a lot of pretty pictures, and that's wonderful. But only really
To make it work.
we know how to actually make that work.
Yeah.
As in, we know whether we need to have a concealed cistern because we need to hide the soil pipe. And it might take us 3 times to get to that decision. But, or I know that if they want to have brass, but we only have a certain amount of budget, I know which 3 brands we should be going for.
Yep.
And if you want a traditional type of tap versus a modern type of tap, where we need to go for. So I guess, it's about how much time does the client have? If the client is time poor, they are just not going to have the amount of time that's needed to make those choices, in which case...
Or they'll just settle. Like, I think often, which is unfortunate, is that they'll run out of steam and they will be like, it's fine, I'll get this tap and this. And it's fine, but it's just a shame because most of the cost of that project is going in buying all these things and the actual build cost. And actually just to have kind of had somebody coordinate all of these choices, because like I said before, it is what you're at the end of the day are going to see. It feels like it's the best use of money, really, to make, and it's so yes.
Was the most rewarded? Was the most rewarded project we've been working together, and why? I think all of us have in our head which one it was.
Yeah, I think probably the most recent one that we've just completed. Because I think that is a real sort of archetypal example of fantastic clients who understood the process and were on board with listening to that process. So we had lots of time to plan, we had lots of time to debate and talk and choose and decide. And then we had the dream team. So obviously it was ourselves all working together, but also we had a garden designer involved. We had a team to make the bespoke kitchen. So it was kind of like all these kind of master craftsmen coming together, working towards the same goal. And I think you can feel it.
Definitely, yes. Also, just like, the clients, when it was great of them, we explained the benefit. We knew we wanted to work with CR, like the type of project we wouldn't want to work with anybody else. We've worked with you before. Grace has worked with you many times. The kind of, to go out to a competitive tender, we all sort of knew would be a waste of time, right? And actually, we knew the value of what you brought to the team. And whilst we may have gone out to competitive tender if somebody had sort of seemingly come in at a lower price, we would be very wary of that. It's like, well, this needs somebody like yourselves who are going to go that extra mile to make sure that every detail is achieved as per what we've worked through for the last 12 months, who are going to care about this project as much as we do, as much as the clients want somebody to. And I think to get a contractor, as yourselves agreed, while still in the production of the tender pack is really helpful, because we were already having conversations about, will we need to upgrade, the fuse board? How much space do we need for that? What about the kind of the situation with how much, like, how big does the boiler? Can we put the boiler in the side shed?
Yep.
We need a technical answer. It's going to have an impact on the rest of the planning of certain spaces. So we were already having these conversations, and I think that's where, like, the idea of it being a team comes back, and it's really important. Like, you were part of the design process.
Yep.
Before we started,
And also knowing what we could achieve by working with yourselves, or we've done a similar detail on a different project, but can we tweak it and can we make it this way, etc., etc. So kind of it allowed us, I suppose, to feel more comfortable in proposing certain elements.
We were being quite, I guess, ambitious with the use of all of the European oak that we were using. We had these timber kind of hatch windows, lots of internal oak in the extension. And the execution of all of that was sort of paramount to the success of that space. And, if we were working with somebody who we never worked with before, it would have been a huge risk to sort of specify all of that. And obviously, we knew we were in safe hands. And but it was a huge part of the project, wasn't it? Something like that. So
But it's been, I mean, obviously, without sounding too fluffy, of course, there's always like things that we have to solve on site. But
it's always
the
job, isn't it?
Yeah. But no one ever falls out. It's never an issue. There's always a solution. You're so accommodating in order, in helping us achieve those details, even though it's probably agonizing. But I guess it's just enabling that to happen. Never feeling like you can't ask for more, I suppose. And that's the thing, like, we do ask, we do demand a certain finish, and knowing that you will be there right to the end, so that a lot of things fall down right at the end. I always find that in a building project is a bit like the end of a relationship. Like, everyone's just like, I want these builders out of the house. We've had enough now, etc., etc. And so towards the end, it can always dip a little bit, which is a real shame. But I think the attention to detail of the snagging is so important, and so many builders don't want to do that because it's really time consuming.
Yeah, but that's what gives the satisfaction to the client, to you as a designer, to you as an architect. For me as a contractor, me personally, actually, that for me is very important. Everything on the finishings and everything on the snagging, everything onto the completion, the last mile, that's for me very important, because that's what gives the satisfaction to all the parties involved, and that's going to keep the client actually, happy, and the satisfaction you have it on the ends.
It really is going that extra mile. I mean,
Yes.
normally the last sort of month of projects where we're working with yourselves, I mean, there'll be, 5 or 6 guys on site, all just filling and sanding and painting, filling and sanding. And it's like, I always forget his name, who was doing the ceiling. Bonnets. he was filling and sanding and with his torch looking at that roof, just at the ceiling, just to make sure it was perfectly smooth and any little imperfection. And I'd see him doing that like on and off over like several days, making sure it's absolutely spot on. And
That's attention to detail.
that's
Yeah.
attention to detail, and
Yeah.
that's I think a difference
Yes.
where you are briefing your guys to care that much. You've
Yeah.
got the guys who want to and have the ability and the eye to care that much. And I don't know how, testament to you, how you managed to kind of get that level of quality and find the guys who want to spend 3 days filling and sanding the ceiling to get it absolutely spot on.
It's taking time to train the guys to be that way, and it's taking time actually. But for me and for all my guys, it's important to have the quality there and attention to details, which is very important actually to deliver the project.
Yeah.
And all my guys, they know, even if they spend 1 day or 2 days more, spend it, because that's our reputation, that's our name,
Yeah.
and what we deliver it, the best to the project.
And it makes it very stark though when you work with other contractors and that end is a real slog, or they don't quite get or understand that finished detail.
The thing is, it's so subjective. It's really hard to say that silicon line is a bit too thick. Do it again. Fat worms.
That were
Fat worms, right? Like you can't necessarily snag a thick silicon joint. It's subjective. That's what it's fine. That's like the recommended thickness of a silicon bead.
Yeah.
Well, it looks horrible. Like, well, I don't think it looks horrible. It looks fine. It's like, well, what do you do in that sense? Was
Yeah.
And that's where it's difficult to have that understanding of the level of quality and well, you've got Grace on your back, so you've got to be careful.
And let's not and it's also about that good humor. I mean, I'm often the only female on site with a huge list that everyone laughs about, but you understand it, and I know that you understand it, and there are things that like that there's never going to be any tile trim.
But that's you to be organized everything, which is very good. Maybe some contractors, they say, oh, it's again another list or anything. But for me, it's good actually, and for John and for my
Saving
team.
you a job, right?
Yeah, because it's actually, you are organized, you know exactly what you want, you know exactly what the client wants, because you are very close to the clients and working very close to the clients. So for us, we respect and we appreciate those lists. And I love it.
Everyone
I
loves
love
lists,
yeah.
really.
You can't you can't do a renovation project without it. My life
No.
is a spreadsheet, but that's how things don't
That's
get
how you can
missed.
deliver it, yeah. But that's how you can deliver the best actually, by being organized.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's also what, like going back to my early questions about like how we work together, is you're not just an interior designer. You have all of those lists. You have that memory, and I think it's like together the project management aspect of a project on site. There is so much organization that's involved, and like I have to kind of be constantly updating drawings, reissuing drawings, capturing any little tweak that is kind of coming from the client that's maybe coming from yourself. There is a constant reissuing of new drawings, or helping the guys at that particular point in the project. Here's a new drawing with the key dimensions to help your guys on site to set out that bathroom, find that center point in that vanity unit of where your plumber now needs to bring the taps out of the wall. So there's a constant flow of information once a project is on site, which helps everybody. And it's always just trying to kind of avoid things having to be undone. Like we hate it if anything gets missed and we're like, really sorry, but that's not kind of right. And we're just all trying to make the process as efficient and easy for everybody. And I think we've all got like roles to be playing in that to enable that to happen. But the lists are really important. I think that is such an important part of a project, which like we do joke about it, but to know that all of those messages that are coming through from the clients on WhatsApp at sort of 10 o'clock in the evening, can we just change that? Or can you ask Costel about the price for this? Or we're actually now thinking about maybe like doing a bit of work in that bed, like whatever it is.
It's on that list.
It's on that list.
And everyone is joking about that list, but everyone is appreciating that list.
Yeah.
So,
The lists aren't going anywhere, don't worry.
yeah. What's your proudest moment, proudest part of, being a designer, being an architect, and being both of you starting actually from doing your houses actually,
Mm.
and then from there becoming an interior designer, becoming an architect. What's your proudest moments you had it onto?
I think, like, generally speaking, the proudest moments are when the clients really
Yeah.
heartfeltly, whatever the right word is, say, we love it. We love living in this house. Like recently on the Lancaster Road project, they sent a message to us both saying, we still can't really believe this is our house.
Yeah.
And that kind of makes all of that effort worth, all like the PTSD from, like, going through that project. Kind of, we've transformed their lives.
Yeah.
And architecture and homes and interior design have the ability to do that. And their kids are growing up in that home, all the friends that come to visit, all of those memories that they're then making in that new renovated home, you've facilitated. And I think that's what kind of makes us do what we do. It's a very hard job what we do. There's easier ways to live it.
There's much easier ways to make a living.
And we often talk about that
Yeah.
when we're sort of
Yeah.
fighting over a kind of concealed system not fitting.
Yeah.
It does make you to forget actually all the months which has been stressful, thinking, stressing yourself for what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, what's happening on site today.
Yeah.
So it does make you to forget all those and just see actually the fun.
And also, I think it's nice when your peers also recognize it. So
Yeah.
if you say, good job, or even one of the guys, like, I really like this kitchen, or great design, or whatever, it's funny, but those things
Yeah.
really matter.
Yes. And that's kind of where social media is quite interesting.
Yes.
I spend as little time as I can, like, posting on Instagram.
Yeah.
But every now and again when I do, and some of my, like, colleagues and friends are like, wow,
Yeah.
it's like, that's really nice to kind of hear just from people you really respect in your industry that you've worked with in the past.
And I think probably because of time restrictions, because we work by ourselves, we don't necessarily have enough time to enjoy those good moments. Do you know what I mean? So we have to focus about trying to, shoot a few more projects so that we can see them kind of, on paper potentially, whether that's in a magazine or, on one of the websites, all of those things, it is important to kind of just say, it was worthwhile. But ultimately, it's about the client loving living in their house, and that design, empowering them and facilitating the way that they live, really.
Yeah. And making, I often say, making nice things, right? We make a nice thing.
Yeah.
And this, like,
it's silly how excited you get about, I mean, for me, it's, I think, tiles, and I know we talked about tile trim, but, when you're creating that perfect niche and the mitered edges are so crisp and your tiler is brilliant at doing this, and the excitement that you get from seeing it is,
it's the product of so many hours worth of sitting, deliberating over these things. So we had this also in the family bathroom, right? When it's a beautiful space, but we spent so long deliberating over so many bits of that bathroom, and then we went in there a little while ago, just whilst we were, like, snagging and finishing up before the guys were moving back in, and we just kind of had a moment to look at it and go, wow, look at it, we did it. Look at this.
Yes.
we did it.
This is a beautiful bathroom.
Very proudest moment.
Yeah, I mean, because you have to kind of solve so many problems. I think it's such an interesting job, really, because it is an aesthetic job, and obviously we're always trying to do things that are kind of rooted in beauty and a calm way to live, and all these projects always are kind of about these moments. And I think I certainly, when I set up the views in the model, you talked about it before, it's like there are moments in every space,
Yeah.
which are often all it kind of goes back to what I really kind of when I was studying, what I really loved was this idea of sort of sacred geometry.
Yep.
Like, there are always, like, controlling lines in all of the projects. There will be a moment when you're standing in the kitchen and you're in the middle of the island and you're looking straight out and the rafters are kind of exactly centered and everything is kind of just set up from that
Perfect align.
perfectly aligned, and we kind of go through a lot of headaches to get these sort of aligned with us. So, but when you're standing there, there is something quite beautiful, and it's the same thing that people feel when they go into like a church. There's like church is a classic example, right? It's all set up by these controlling lines, and you walk down the middle, and it's a kind of exaggerated example, but there is something quite moving about being in a space that is controlled by these geometries. And in every space, there is a kind of a moment where you sort of like are standing there and you're looking at it, and it's like,
Yeah.
this is a little kind of snapshot of perfection. And then your kind of life goes back to sort of being a bit chaotic again and whatever. But there's these little still moments within the journey. You're moving through the spaces that are just right. And those are the special moments.
That's good. That's good. Do you have any influence onto your design by your family, your passion, your fitness, your personal life? It's anything which is influences the design you're doing every day.
I think just living as a kind of like member of a busy family household, of course that massively influences you because you're always thinking about, oh God, I wish that wasn't there, or what could I do to make that better, or oh, should I have done that, or I might do that next time. So I think that just like your day-to-day
Yeah.
life and um the pressures of kind of like having young children. And I suppose it's, it's interesting thinking about because I'd say a lot of our clients have got younger children.
Yep.
So they're thinking about the fact that their house needs to cater for children being around them the whole time. They need to have
Yep.
an eye on them. But what you've also got to think, and what I'm at the stage of now is, my children are getting older and they don't actually want to be with me. Which is fine. And so how does your house evolve to kind of cater for that? And how do you make sure that, as everyone's lives
Yep.
evolve, is there enough nice garden space for the adults to go and be there? Is there somewhere that the kids can go and play? And endless new sports that are taken on. So I think that I suppose being a real person and designing for real people is, I suppose, very important because a lot of people think that interior designers are just for the very wealthy, and that's not the
No.
case. You don't have to be wealthy to have a well-designed, thought-out space. So I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I think I would say, in terms of like maybe how we've both prioritized at this stage in our careers is wanting to be available for our young kids. Okay, 'cause we're both,
Yeah.
we always are talking about like how do we sort of grow our profession, like our practice. We're obviously not one practice, but we often talk about should we set up an office, should we employ people? Like, we're doing all of this ourselves. We're delivering these big projects, and we're doing everything. Okay, it's kind of crazy.
It's crazy because, if say, for example, a toilet arrives damaged on site, I'm the one sitting on the phone for half an hour on hold to the
Yeah,
company
and
to
I'm
get a replacement.
I'm drawing every bit of the project, from start to finish. Every drawing is produced by myself. No one else is taking any of the heavy lifting off. So it is kind of crazy. But we, at the same time, I think it allows us to have complete control over these projects. Like the clients are only ever talking to us.
Yes.
They're never talking to the assistant. They're never talking to there's never different people going to sites. So it enables us to work on, it forces us to work on fewer projects, but those projects we have complete control over. And I think that's really important at this stage, whilst we're really focusing on, I guess, building a reputation for quality, for really building those kind of client relationships, the relationships with the contractors, like really kind of setting the foundations for what, sure, could become a much bigger practice.
But do we want,
Do we want to do it?
the balance of family life?
Yeah, at this stage, certainly, I think it's all about actually getting the balance right. And we are kind of prioritizing less projects, keeping it kind of small, really having good control over them, but being able to take the kids to school and go to their performance and being there. We're both always at home when the kids get home. It's important at this stage. But as they're getting older, like in a few more years, when they they want us less and less, then I think there is certainly a conversation to be had about actually let's start scaling a little bit. Let's start taking a little bit of pressure off us, get the right people in, and see perhaps maybe where it could go then. But I don't know. That's
To be continued.
to be continued.
Continue that.
Yeah.
Yes.
For now, just keep making very nicely crafted
Yeah.
projects.
With the help of yourself.
Yeah.
Oh yes. Thank you very much. Yeah. Because we're closing this session now, and anyone watching, anyone listening, and if you want to work very closely with a good architect, with a good designer, please get in touch with Polygon Architects, with Gracious Spaces, and they will work very closely with you. Very, they are hands on everything, and actually you don't gonna have any stress with anything. So whenever you look for architect to do your extension, loft renovation, or interior designer to do your bathroom, kitchen, or anything, and they creating the best team, and they can deliver the best service, look no further. You'll find all the details actually down into the comments, and you can get in touch with them directly or write to us, or we put you in touch, and we can deliver it together. If it's a bigger project, we can deliver the best service.
Yeah.
So whenever it's anything, don't hesitate to call us, and then follow us onto the Instagram, Facebook, all the social media platforms, and we'll put actually the links of the websites of Polygon Architects and Gracious Space onto the link below, which you can go to their website and see what service they're delivering, and you're not going to be disappointed. You'll get the best service from the best architect and the best designer. Thank you very much for watching us. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for both of you to accepting to be here
Pleasure.
and joining us.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. All good? Yeah,
God, we went on a bit long, didn't we?
it's all right.
Sorry.
Did we?
Nah, it's all right. It's all right. Yeah, easy. It's all
It's an hour and 2 minutes,
right.
which is all good.
Edit it down. There was definitely some waffle on my part. Edit it down. There's definitely some waffle on my part.
No, that
No,
brilliant.
it's all good.
Fantastic.
It's not all been good. Thank you.
Yeah,